Hi there, it's Fred Sweet. Thanks for tuning in to Guitar Media, and welcome to Guitar Media's Joe Perry Les Paul video. We're here today to take a look at this circa early 80s luthier build Les Paul and Blackburst. So I spotted this guitar posted a while back on Facebook for $500 as a fake Gibson, and in the listing it was described as an Epiphone body and a Gibson neck. I was really hesitant to contact the seller, but at the time I did notice that the decal was a real Gibson decal, and I was very excited about the guitar. So after a week had gone by, I noticed that the seller lowered the price to $350, and I contacted him almost immediately, meeting him the next morning somewhere down in Georgia at a bus stop in the rain to buy the guitar. I noticed that the neck had a pull in it, but I wasn't concerned. Getting home with the guitar, we quickly uncovered what looked to be an original Gibson truss rod, as well as aged binding that looked to be Gibson original around the headstock, but aftermarket around the body. Showing its age, we also found a strap in the case also showing its age. So it turns out the old guitar strap was actually an Ernie Ball strap that someone had marked out the name Ernie Ball on the strap. Anyways, after getting the pickups out of the guitar, we were pleasantly surprised to find out it had what looked to be the original Gibson patent applied for pickups, of course not original to the guitar. The bridge pickup checked out at 7.9 k ohms on my meter, and the neck pickup checked out at 7.6 k ohms. After checking out the cavity, we found 500K CTS pots that looked to possibly date to the 32nd and 37th week of 2008. The capacitors, the tone capacitors, were RS Guitar Works capacitors that we would then later verify with RS Guitar Works to be manufactured before the date of 2012. It was then that we noticed that one of the tone capacitors, the bridge tone capacitor, was a 0.022, which is a normal value to see in a lot of guitars, but the neck capacitor was unusually a 0.015, which is a little bit different of a value. We also noticed that someone at some point in time had actually cut a ground wire, and you can see it here in the cavity. We have since resoldered the connection, and so the guitar is good and grounded. After observing the body routes and the neck joint, we thought that they looked a little strange, so we ran them by our local professional, and he was able to confirm that they were nothing like anything he had ever seen before and looked to be a luthier build guitar. After ultimately establishing that it was safe to say that it wasn't a real Gibson, we were still interested in somehow dating the guitar and discovering its history and origins. After looking at the Gibson decal very closely, it has what I like to call the Norland CNC decal, manufactured from 1970 up until 1985. While I may have been content just to assume that some luthier had these parts laying around and decided to throw this guitar together, Dad suggested, no, this has got to be a heavy metal rock star's guitar, and really for good reason. If you consider the value of the pickups at the time that the guitar appears to have been rewired sometime in 2008 and 2009, it would be far more than the average guitar player or luthier would be able to afford. And within 5 minutes, I was able to find the Joe Perry model, the Joe Perry signature model, and the striking resemblance of the Joe Perry signature model in this particular guitar. The original Joe Perry signature model would incorporate the use of an overwound bridge pickup, a 57 Classic in the neck position, a master tone control, and a mid boost selectable from a push-pull from the neck, what would normally be the neck volume, tone pot. And so when this is engaged, they used a 9-volt battery and a mid boost to create what they call a wah circuit. So before we go over any of the other Joe Perry models, we need to take a quick look at the Joe Perry Les Paul story. So Joe Perry left Aerosmith in 1979, and in 1982, Perry divorced his first wife, Elisa Jarrett. Like most divorces, this one came at a considerable financial cost to Perry. He and Steven Tyler would get sober shortly after in 1983 or 1984, and Joe Perry would rejoin Aerosmith, but not before having to part with his beloved 1959 Tobacco Burst Les Paul in the divorce settlement. Shortly after the divorce, Perry's wife sold the guitar to a music shop in Cambridge, Massachusetts for $4,500. Billy Lusigan, an employee at the shop, bought it and sold it to a notable guitar dealer, Gary Budin. In 1984, Budin sold the guitar to another legendary guitarist, Eric Johnson. Johnson ended up finding out that the guitar had previously belonged to Perry and offered to sell the guitar to him for the same price he paid for it. But unfortunately, Perry did not have the money at the time, so the guitar ended up being sold to Slash in 1988 or 1989 for a reported sum of $8,000. Slash would then, or Joe Perry would then go on to attempt to re-buy the guitar from Slash, be denied, and eventually Slash would return the guitar to Joe Perry at a birthday party in year 2000. But this jumps over the 1997 model Joe Perry Signature Edition and completes Joe Perry's amazing story, once again in a nutshell, losing his membership of the band, losing his lifelong partner at the time, losing his prize guitar, and then slowly regaining his membership of the band, coming out with a signature model and reinventing the 59 burst while it was away from him, and eventually being rejoined with his 59 burst and remarrying later on. So now let's talk about Joe Perry's RS Guitar Works Bones and Bullets model featured in Premier Guitar's 2010 article. A self-confessed 60s rock fan, guitar collector, horse enthusiast, and gearhead, Joe spent time discussing his love of funky Supro guitars and how he surprisingly plans to unload a significant portion of his vast collection in the coming year. I also have a guitar that was put together for me by RS Guitar Works that has a Fralin P90 in the bridge and a Joe Barden pickups in the middle and the neck. And this is Joe Perry's Bones and Bullets that I also read at some other place, online, that it was produced around 2000, but it shows him here playing in a couple of different pictures on stage right around the time frame of 2009. And so this is interesting, this time frame, when you consider just taking a jump back here at the time frame. So when you consider that Joe left Aerosmith in 79 and his divorce and departure from his main Les Paul was in the early 80s, 1982. And then you look at this guitar, the Norland decal, it basically puts it at 85, right around the early to mid 80s. And so it appears that maybe possibly some way he was beginning to recreate his 59 bursts on a budget at that time. So I just want to clarify, although it appears that Joe Perry began to recreate his 59 Les Paul on a budget, this guitar is safe to say not a real Gibson guitar, and we do not know who previously owned it. So now I'd just like to share a few more photos of Joe Perry on stage with his RS Bones and Bullets guitar and with Slash. And also in the 70s, we see Joe Perry with his Les Paul Custom on stage throughout the 70s, 1974 and 1976. And even a photo here of Aerosmith with Joe Perry and the other guitarists both playing Les Pauls and Les Paul Customs. And then finally, we noticed that Joe Perry, his preference with the Les Paul Custom is chrome hardware. And, revisiting, I just want to revisit the Gibson Les Paul Custom model and the Silverburst, because I think the Silverburst is very inspirational model by Gibson. It was originally produced from 1978 to sometime around 1981 or 1982, and it was reported to be a very low number production on the original Silverburst run. And at that time in the early 80s, Les Paul Customs, they actually had, I believe it was a 2575 anniversary or 2550 anniversary, but for the most part, Les Paul Customs would be black with gold hardware, and so it was somewhat unusual to see them with chrome hardware, and that apparently was Joe Perry's preference. And this is interesting how he reinvents the Sunburst Les Paul flame top in with the inspiration of the Silverburst, and they actually call it a Blackburst. Thanks for watching, and check our channel for our latest videos.